Hi, everybody. Welcome once again to Making AI Possible, presented by Caltech's Center for Technology and Management Education. My name is Nicholas Baudois. I'm the Director of AI Programs here at Caltech CTME. CTME is a gem based in Pasadena. We leverage various cutting-edge professors at Caltech. We bring in researchers from the different research labs, researchers and scientists from NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, and industry experts from AI, data science, and machine learning to talk about best practices in AI. We hold programs on campus, remotely online, and go to different locations throughout the world, leveraging this same arsenal of instructors. But more importantly, what you're here today to talk about is from two distinguished individuals within the field of AI. And we're answering the question about this cognitive coup that's happening within AI. And it's a phrase that we've heard more and more. The idea is that there's something is quietly taking over how we think while we're busy being impressed by how fast AI works. And this idea, if you just hand off enough synthesis or enough analysis, enough writing or decision making, at some point you need to ask the question of who's in control. And so to answer that, we have Dr. Fatima Zahra coming from Knoxville, Tennessee. She is the founding director of the Air Lab at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Stands for Artificial Intelligence, Race, and Evaluation. She is the assistant professor of evaluation, statistics, and methodology, trained as an applied psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania with postdocs and from Harvard Business School and Harvard Chan School. Her recent project, Critical Thinking with Gen AI, has won numerous accolades as her work with learners from middle school all the way to graduate school, all the way to refugee populations in Bangladesh and communities navigating climate displacement. And on the other side, we have a neuroscientist. Not brand new to the show, Dr. Crystal Dilworth, a science communicator, neuroscientist, and leadership strategist who bridges science, technology, and human storytelling, and is also a Caltech CTME instructor. She earned her PhD at Caltech and now serves as a strategic advisor and science communicator, helping tech and innovation teams translate complex ideas into human-centered impact. You might have seen her on PBS, Voice of America, CBS's kids show, Mission Unstoppable, as Dr. Brain. She leads the Crystalline Group to imagine how science, culture, and leadership intersect. Also, she is the host of Caltech's very own Watson Lecture, which is 103 years in the making, bringing Caltech's brightest faculty minds to center stage for the community. So I'd like to invite both Dr. Zahra and Dr. Dilworth to the show. Welcome. First, Fatima, let's give an introduction in your own words about the research you're doing and a little bit about how you got here.
Thank you so much, Nick, first of all, for inviting us, but also with that very kind introduction. I don't think I can beat that. In my own words, I would say that, the introduction that you gave was perfect. I am an applied psychologist who studies education and work futures. And you mentioned Air Lab. At Air Lab, we are basically studying how generative tools are impacting who gets to think, learn, and earn. So my work spans across like different continents. So starting from US classrooms to Cox's Bazar refugee camps, Rohingya refugee camps, and then, universities and educational settings in Rwanda. And we really center culturally responsive methods while we ask these questions and design AI-assisted interventions.
Excellent. Thank you. And Crystal, I know you gave an introduction when we had you to the show last year, but for those who might not be familiar with all of your work online at this point, if you haven't seen Crystal's TED Talk or her guest appearance as Dr. Brain on CBS, I invite you to. But in your own words, what are you up to these days?
I mean, I was trying to think because I agree with Fatima. It's very difficult to beat the intro that you've already given. Thank you for that. That was lovely. I'm really concerned with the way that science and scientists sort of translate from the academic ivory tower into the real world. And so that interface between research and public or invention and commercialization, I'm always sort of there at that transition. I work with startup companies, I work with academics, institutions as well as individuals. And Fatima and I, when we met, I was working at UTK, we really sort of hit it off. And in terms of technological impacts on human behavior, I think her work is just absolutely critical to designing the future that we want to live in. And I'm so happy to be supporting her and AR Lab, sort of in scaling what they've already been doing so effectively.
Excellent. As I was saying that, I had a 20-pound dog in the background barking at somebody at the door, so I apologize about that. All right, let's start it off. Primary questions that I want to ask Dr. Zafra and also Dr. Dilworth to get your take on this is essentially this cognitive coup framing assumes AI is taking something away. Your research suggests it's also handing something to people who never had it. So can both be true at the same times, or is necessarily one of the framings wrong there?
Thanks, Nick, for the question. I can take that question. And then Crystal, feel free to interrupt me and, like jump in. Um, this term, cognitive coup, I actually have a funny story about that. So this was a few more than a few weeks ago when I had a weekend where I decided that I will take some time off of work because my mom complains that I'm glued to my laptop and my phone. So, I wanted to like prove her wrong. So I'm like, okay, so I'm just gonna this idea that I had, I'm just gonna write about this in a paragraph, and then I'm going to like think about it with my team sometime in the next few weeks. And then once I jotted down these ideas based on some of the work that we're doing, and but also like what's going on, there's a ton of literature out there where the science, researchers and cognitive scientists and neuroscientists, they're talking about the negative impact of uh, unintentional or lack use of AI when you're not using it with like intentions, like intentional use of AI. So opposite of that. Um, and there are literature that shows like to what extent that can really impact your cognitive capacities. And I was then also looking at some of the work that we're doing in the global south, specifically in Rwanda and Bangladesh. And I couldn't stop with that paragraph. I started looking at some of the data sets that some of these LLMs are using. I started looking at some of the notes that I had from the field, and I ended up writing a paper on cognitive coup. And I like to believe that I started this term. It's still under review in educational researcher, so fingers crossed. I really hope it gets published. But the idea behind this is that there is offloading that's happening, but there's also this like the scale of the offloading that is happening. And what does that mean like at a systems level? If there are two people who were cognitively offloading as opposed to 2 million people, as opposed to like 200 million people, right? And then the way the data sets are trained to understand how we function and how we respond to certain cues, coming from these LLMs, and how they are being trained using like Western standards or weird cultural contexts. And that really changes the way people's cognitions are measured as well as they're valued. So if you're, let's say you're a 5-year old, student, or like maybe let's say 10-year-old Rwandan student in Kigali, and you are talking to GPT or Claude or any other, one of those a generative AIs about your experience in Kigali, and you're writing English in a way that is not considered as appropriate or proper by these trained models, because these trained models are not trained to register how Rwandese is spoken or how Rwandese express themselves, right? So not everyone is speaking American English or British English or, the major languages. So what happens then? So that is the broader question that I'm attacking. I feel like I'm sort of uh, going in a different direction from where you're asking the question. But the main problem, I think, here is this is not within the control of the users. The users are not benefiting from these models as much as we would like to believe that. And the way these models are being trained and the data is being tested and analyzed and used also seem quite extractive.
Now
I mean,
that's
I think
go
I
ahead. I
think that this
Crystal,
is
I was sending the ball your end, so take it.
No, I just jump in like that. I don't need the invitation. I'm here with the opinion. I mean, I think that like two yes ands to what Fatima was saying. I think in terms of the cognitive offloading, um, I find myself really struggling with how to process some of the information that's coming out in these papers about how humans are sort of losing the ability to access those higher order thought processes. And we're using AI as a shortcut to an answer as opposed to taking the time and using the neurological connections, to find answers. And because on one hand, you want to quote unquote preserve, what nature has evolved on the human cognition side. But on the other hand, I have to ask, like, is this just natural evolution? Like, are we going to lose these capabilities because there's no selection pressure to retain them anymore? And what is the human brain physically going to look like if we're training certain brain areas and not training others? It's a very interesting question, and I am struggling with like, okay, where do I want to fall in history? I don't want to be the old person that's like, get off my lawn, everyone should ride horses and cars are horrible. But at the same time, right, we have this idea that there's something precious about humanity, that's connected to cognition, it's connected to consciousness, and it's connected to culture. I think the homogenization of culture was something that Fatima was trying to get to in her answer as well, which is a concern when we're sort of asking AI to do that heavy lifting for us, and it has no vested interest in retention of our values and our cultural rituals.
So, what's the answer to that? If you have frontier labs that are pushing essentially a consumer product, how do you ensure that the training is coming from a culturally respective area? ChatGPT can reproduce how many languages, but does that mean it's reproducing, the cultural affirmations and the cultural perspectives? I'd love to hear either of you talk about that aspect.
Yeah, but before I answer that question, thanks, Crystal, for clarifying what I was saying, because I feel like that you have said it better than what I was trying to say. Um, I just want to like make the distinction between cognitive coup and cognitive offloading. And I think that will help us understand what is at stake. So when I say cognitive coup, like that happens when these tools, any kind of AI tools, are taking over human analysis, evaluation, and synthesis capacities. So it's basically taking on what humans are used to doing. Cognitive offloading, on the other hand, um, it's slightly different because not all offloading is bad. And I know like some of you might be cringing when I said that. But the question that I'm trying to get to is like what gets offloaded? When offloading is systemic, it's part of the system where you are losing control of your analysis, evaluation, and synthesis process. That's when the power is being taken away from you as a thinker, as a human thinker. So the question is like, what is getting offloaded? And what is staying with the student or the human? So, like a while ago, calculators were used to offload arithmetic, right? So there were people who were against calculator. But we are still teaching reasoning about quantity, even though we are using calculators. But separate from that, cognitive coup happens when these tools take over the analysis, take over the evaluation, and take over the synthesis. So I wanted to make that distinction. In terms of what companies can do or how these tools are being produced or designed and scaled, it's not just enough to have data in all different languages. What is important to acknowledge here that this most of it is a black box. We don't have access to the data that is helping us making some key decisions in daily lives. Like I have students who have AI girlfriend and boyfriends. I'm not even kidding. I know a colleague who I respect very much. Her work is awesome, and she's one of the leading methodologists in the country. And she talks about having an AI best friend. So this is happening whether we want it or not. But what these interactions are based on data, right? But we don't have access to the data. So we need to know like what data are they are being trained on, and we need to have those access. So instead of trying to build better models, we need better transparency systems, or like an architecture where it's important to disclose where the data is coming from and how the data is being processed and used.
And do you see any companies, organizations, or country level legislation that's leading that charge around the world?
That's a great question. Honestly, I don't know. Like, I know countries where I work, for instance, in the US, Rwanda, and Bangladesh. And I, if I have to be candid, I would say that Rwandan government has a very futuristic approach to AI, and they are not treating it as a threat, but they're also not treating it as a magic bullet. So there is a balance. If you look at their AI policies, or white papers, or whatever they have published online, it seems like they understand that, like anything else, like a calculator, AI is also just a tool that can optimize human potential. But I am actually not knowledgeable about the AI policies in different countries in the world. In Bangladesh, I work very closely with 7 different ministries. And what I have seen is that we have actually, this is not a funny story, it's a serious story. We have done a high level need evaluation with the 7 different ministries and 13 industry sector leaders in Bangladesh. And this paper is about to go out, like literally on Monday. We just finished the writing. Yeah, fingers crossed. It is a qualitative need evaluation at the very top level, at the industry level, sector, and also in the government sector. What we found is that different ministries and industry sectors have their own training programs and own scaling projects that they're scaling, their own systems for scaling, but they're not talking to each other. What I'm calling this phenomenon is an evaluation vacuum. So let's say, Nick, you are running the garment industry, just for the sake of like ease to understand, and I am running the education industry in Bangladesh. You have your innovations and I have my innovations. I'm training my people, you're training my people, and we're not talking to each other. That's exactly what's going on in Bangladesh. So there are many scientists and even like government officials and teachers and civil society folks that are working towards the same goal, but they're not talking to each other.
If I were to make a guess, I personally, me, the single citizen, right? I would look to the European Union to be the first to come out with some kind of guideline, just because they seem to be leading the way with sort of like digital um, governance, and based on their historic sort of process, and they don't have the economic pressure that some of the other countries do to just sort of let it run and let the economic machine, recoup the return on investors' money. From a fragmented systems perspective, it's interesting. And Fatima, maybe you can step in and answer this as well. Like, you want necessarily individual groups to be using the tool in the way that's best for their particular mandate and their particular purpose within the organization or within a government. And so you would want those AI implementations to be tailored and specific for the work that that group or that team needs to do. Where's the line at, okay, this is me using the tool in a custom way for my purpose, and what needs to be happening and in a global either government or organizational framework? Do you have a sense of that?
Is that a question for me or Nick?
Yeah, for you. And then Nick, with his experience, can chime in if he wants, since I've taken the hosting duties out of his hands.
Done. Gladly passed over to you. Thank you.
I'm having so much fun in this, because it feels like a chaos, but it feels like I'm also having a lot of fun. I hope you guys are also having fun. I know this is supposed to be a free flow conversation. I think we have hit the mark on that. I'm going in all different directions with my ideas and my data. So here is something. Um, no one solution can solve the different unique kinds of problems that each one of us has. Even if a country is an entity, like a country itself has like 1,000 different kinds of problems. But even if they had one solution that worked for the country, that it may not work for the second country. Like country X, country Y will not have the same solution. But does that mean that as a human, as humanity, as human as a race, like we don't have something that we can share with each other? I think we can, which is um, the benchmarks, right? So the benchmarks that the field that are using, right? The data sets have facts, and they have, like they're judging them as accurate or inaccurate, standard or not standard, in different languages against different language tradition. We need to ask the questions, and this is a framework that should work for everyone. We should be asking, if I'm using this LLM, like whose facts count? Like
Mm.
when a language model is judged accurate, like accurate by whose standard? And then in which language and against which, like language tradition or knowledge tradition? So if I'm using an LLM, I should have the right to ask those questions and get them answered. So this is a way of thinking about LLMs, which is not very difficult. We have done this for policies. We have done this for other kinds of systems. If there is an education system, we ask, oh, like, is this going to benefit me? Like, does this consider people in my social strata or my socioeconomic strata? Like, will my child be able to speak the language of the curriculum? Is it home language for them? So it's very similar to that. It is a system, and we need to know how the system works and does it work for us. So we need to ask those questions. I can give another example, but I'll hold on for a second.
No, please give another example.
So I think this is the time to actually talk about higher order thinking with generative AI. Crystal, what do you think? Shall we?
Yeah, do it. Go for it.
So, 2.5, almost 3 years ago, like I was having this chat with one of our friends at the University of Pennsylvania. Um, he's an astrophysicist, and we were thinking about about having no teachers in some of these schools in Delhi, in India, and Dhaka in Bangladesh. So both of us are from these two different cities and countries. I'm from Bangladesh, he's from India, and I was like, is there a way we could use? I mean, 3 years ago, GPT or Claude were not at that point where it is now. But even then, we were thinking, is there a way to use these, um, you know, tools to somehow, to some extent, not completely replace teachers because there are no teachers, but some extent have a teaching assistant that can help these kids in these schools that are based in the slum areas in Delhi and Dhaka. At that point, like I started really thinking about, can there be a teaching assistant, a thinking partner that is not the teacher, because the teacher is very knowledgeable, and this teaching partner is not, this thinking partner is not, but it can keep the conversation going. So from that very, like simple idea of wanting to help these kids in the slum areas in Delhi and Dhaka, which we failed. We couldn't actually launch that project, but then the idea sort of bloomed here in my classroom, in my statistics classroom, apply stat for decision makers, where we posed GPT as an AI buddy, a thinking partner for the students. So that's where this journey started, because I and my team, first of all, I started with this idea. I was like, is this crazy? My team is like, no, it's not a crazy idea. Can we address cognitive offloading? Because most of the time when you talk to an average professor, they would say that the students are using, even I would say that students are using GPT to write, and a normal, like an average professor is worried, right? Similar to me. But then again, what can we do about that? We can tell them, do not use this, or you will be penalized. But how do I know if they're using it? They may be very smart about using it, right? So that's when it clicked me that what we are trying to solve in Delhi or in Dhaka with the kids without teachers is very similar to what we are trying to solve here. There, we are trying to give them a cognitive partner. Here, we are doing the same, but in the context of cognitive offloading. So we can use the same model, AI coming in as a thinking partner and helping the students really argue through their own thesis or whatever they're trying to solve. They're testing a hypothesis or they're running a regression model. They have an idea about what that means, what that theory is, and they have a conversation with AI about that and acknowledge that conversation in their work. So broadly speaking, we're calling it next level teaching blueprint, which is really a new teaching approach. It is a proof of concept where we shift our mentality from blaming the students for using GPT or Claude or Perplexity or any kind of AI, generative AI tool, and then centering honesty and truth and curiosity. So that means that they are able to use all of these different tools as much as they want, and they will have to disclose. They will disclose it because there is no penalty for disclosing it. In fact, we are rewarding them for disclosing their thought process and how it has evolved through human AI collaboration. So that's what we are calling hot with generative AI, higher order thinking with generative AI, because in the pre-pilot, we are currently scaling the pilot, but in the pre-pilot in my very small classroom, we saw that it wasn't just impacting critical thinking, other kinds of analytical thinking, but it was also really helping students question assumptions, evaluate their judgments, as well as synthesize and work collaboratively with an AI tool or agent. So that was an interesting pre-pilot that we ran here. And based on that, now we are currently scaling that project at the University of Tennessee, but also hopefully soon in 3 different universities in Rwanda and 90 schools in Bangladesh. So this idea is like a shift in how we think about teaching.
Excellent. And so what are some of the methods that you use to, and again, apologies for the barking in the back. What are some of the methodologies that you use to test for cognitive offload? You know, you might have students using certain types of generative AI tools, but how do you ensure that, you know, the proper cognitive, and Crystal, maybe this is a question for you, ensure that the right cognitive load is being applied. I'm using a lot of terms from neuroscience that I'm not familiar with. It becomes very obvious I'm over my skis. So I'm going to hand it over to you to answer that question.
No, this is Fatima's methodology, so I'll let her go because she's the one with the real boots on the ground results.
Thanks, Crystal. But I feel like we have discussed enough that you can also, sort of
Yeah.
come in. Um, I'm just gonna say that, like as humans, we have certain like tendencies. These are human tendencies. If something is easy, we choose that. Is it easy to like drink soursop bitters in the morning or like a glass of orange juice? Most folks might say like orange juice tastes better than soursop bitters, right? So what we are doing is like mixing soursop bitters with orange juice. Orange juice is the direct answer. So in our study, we saw that students were using a generative AI to cognitively offload in 3 different ways. One is like answer generation. And when I say students, I actually mean me and everyone else, because this is how humans work. Like answer generation, I want to go there, like, oh, let's see what food this restaurant served. Like sometimes I would ask that stupid question to GPT when I can Google, because that's how it has become for some of us, maybe for many of us. So this is like as answer generation. Students are doing the same. And then second level is answer validator. So I've come up with something, I think this is right, or I'm thinking about this. Do you think this is right? So then we are using, let's say GPT as an answer validator. And then at the third level, I'm actually having some kind of collaboration with the generative AI. I am not just trying to validate my answer, but I'm also trying to push through my understanding of what I understand. So that is the collaboration phase. So as I said in the beginning, like not all kinds of offloading is bad. Sometimes it's okay to ask a question and get an answer. But over time, if we are just asking questions and getting answers, that's a problem, right? And then you might ask, like, how do you track that? Because we have access to all the chat logs that the students are, the interaction, right? Human AI interaction that the students are having as a result of participating in a class activity or an assignment, because it is required that they actually have that conversation with AI. The question is it easy to analyze those data? No, it requires a lot of work and people to do that. But at least the students trust us enough to give us access to those chat logs. Because, like it's like giving someone access, somewhat similar to giving someone access to their, cell phone. When you see your cell phone in someone else's hand, it's like, oh, what is happening? So that students are okay with having those conversations handed over to their instructor also shows that the students are spending quite a bit of time actually having conversation with AI. So I'm going to stop here because I don't want to get into the details, too much details here.
I have some context, I think, that I would like to add to that. I think that the thing that when Fatima explains her work, she takes for granted, but for me, is really one of the critical things is the awareness. Like when you go to therapy and you're doing cognitive behavioral therapy, which has, like, well, now I'm over my skis because I'm the neuroscientist talking about psychology, but the framework that's used for behavior change, the first step is awareness. And so, you have to be aware of the fact that you have an opportunity to make a different decision than the ones that's been leading you down the path that you'd like to avoid. And so being aware of why am I using my LLM co-partner, right? Am I asking it to generate an answer? Am I asking it to validate something that I already do? Do I just want it to tell me that I know what I'm talking about? Or am I too lazy to think about it and I'd like the AI to do my thinking for me and just spit out a podcast version of, the 6 papers that I'm too lazy to read? So knowing what you actually want out of your interaction is one of the critical steps, I think, in using this blueprint that Fatima has built, and also like one of the main things that she teaches her students, which is really good, right? Because like we go to a doctor and we ask for their opinion, an answer generator, what's wrong with me? We often will ask for a second opinion before we go into surgery, right? And so taking everything that your LLM best friend is telling you as gospel is actually interacting with your LLM in a way that's different from how you would interact with another human. And that's something that we need to be aware of.
So transitioning this conversation that we have from how it works in education in school, the rollout of tools from Microsoft Copilot to ChatGPT Enterprise to Claude Enterprise and at the organizational level, how can we take the learnings that we're seeing on the education side on people offloading certain workloads and improving other workloads? Personally, I'm thinking is, I find that if I'm on autopilot and I'm working with Claude or ChatGPT and 15 minutes will go by and I don't recognize the product anymore. Similar to if I'm driving on a highway, like I drove from San Diego all the way up to Monterey Bay yesterday on I-5, and I did not take the coast highway. I went through the middle of California, and it is mind-numbingly boring. And I realized I didn't remember the last 15 minutes of what I had driven. So how do we avoid this like highway hypnosis as an organization? You might be working through a PowerPoint document, and you're on hour 5. How does it not become the AI tool, and how do you maintain, you within that? Are there any learnings that we see on the educational side that we can apply at the organizational side as we have these tool rollouts?
That's when you want to take that first. You want to talk about some of your results?
The ball's in the air. Anyone who catches it goes.
Well, we'll take it together. Crystal, I feel like you're swerving a lot of these balls. Just because I'm a researcher. I'll take the first half of the question, in terms of like translating some of the results from in the education field to like to the business or outside of education for organizations. Like I would say most organizations are measuring success on the wrong axis through productivity gains or cost reduction or other kinds of metrics, and these are the output metrics. What they're missing is the capability erosion. So what that means is that for a human to be truly productive and developed, and I'm sort of channeling my inner Amartya Sen here, a true capability is freedom to be able to choose what you want to do and what you want to become. In this case, organizations need to center, if I might say, human capability. And part of that is the ability to think freely and for oneself. So if the results from this educational intervention can be translated to an organization that is looking to develop their human resources, I would say that focus on the human capabilities. Because in this age of AI, capacities like skills like empathy, being able to read people's emotion, being able to think critically, being able to discern fake from real facts or otherwise, are skill sets that are going to pay really well. And this is just not me speaking. If you look at the literature, the research that are coming out recently, but also like tons and tons of op-eds and new research-based news articles, you will see that that's actually true. So that would be like my suggestion. If your analysts are using generative tools to write, are they still building analytical judgment? That's the question I would ask if I own an organization. I mean, I direct Air Labs, so that's the question I ask for my students. Like, you're using generative tools to write, but are you using your analytical judgment? So in 2 years, like, who on this team can still catch a confident wrong output? Those are the outcomes that I'll be focusing on.
From a professional perspective, some of the evaluation that Fatima does with her students to see how they are using their LLM partners, I think can and should be embedded into performance reviews in the corporate environment. Billions of dollars are going into AI implementation and transformation and layoffs, and the structure of an organization is going to look fundamentally different as AI becomes the inevitable technology that it already has shown itself to be. And how do we protect our investment in the humans that we're retaining in positions? Right? We need them to retain that aspect of their human cognition in order for them to continue to be effective in the roles that we haven't, sort of outsourced to artificial intelligence. And what Fatima is showing is that there are ways to use the tool, to be trained to interact with the tools, and to measure whether or not you're still using, higher order aspects of synthesis and outcome prediction and judgment and wisdom, which is something that we humans like to think that we own uniquely. And I think the only way to ensure that you're not getting that drift in an organization is to integrate that into the way humans are evaluated for their effectiveness in their role.
Yeah, I cannot agree with you more, Crystal. And on that note, I would say the right question for a CHRO or CTO is not going to be like, oh, did this make us faster? If I was that person, I would be asking questions like, did this make my people more capable or less capable? So, I mean, that's where like sense capability frame comes in, but it is useful here because what we are defining as success organizationally, educationally, in any way, is the expansion of what people can do, right? We like AI because it can make us more effective, more faster, and more productive. But what does the expansion of what people can do look like? It is definitely not the speed. It is more than speed. It's multidimensional. So if there is like a practical takeaway from what Crystal is saying and I'm saying for the audience, it is that build an evaluation like into deployment, like measure measure the judgment that your employees are making, and run an organizational level audit of what your team is doing with the tools now versus what they were doing before. Like how can they optimize their potential, how they can optimize their like outcome as humans using these tools instead of optimizing AI tools, because that's what's happening right now. We are using humans to optimize AI tools. The question is are the tools for humans or vice versa?
One thing that's been coming up a lot at the organizational level that I've noticed, and especially a lot of colleagues, is the AI burnout. We're what ChatGPT launches November 30th, 2022. It's just been upskilling after upskilling after upskilling to kind of keep up. Now the sense of if I don't have an agent running on Claude Code or OpenAI Codex, I'm somehow at a disadvantage. This FOMO of, it's essentially the new phrase being token maxing. If I'm not maximizing every token that I have at my fingertips, then I'm missing out and I'm going to fall behind. Do we see any sense of that on the education level of students feeling overburdened by the amount of AI tools that they need to track, keep up with? In your research, have you come across anything like that?
That's a wonderful question. Crystal, do you want to take this question or do you want me to tackle it?
I don't have data on it, but my sense is that it's sort of the other way around. The students are constantly looking for AI solutions to do work for them and make their lives easier. And it's up to the institution to be aware of what's out there, and sort of and track their use. But I'm not teaching in the classroom every day like Fatima is.
Yeah, thanks, Crystal, for that. I think it does give me that grounding to really say that there is there are like gaps all around, right? So in our understanding of like there's AI burnout, but burnout for whom? Like people who have access to AI. The global majority does not have access to AI. Let's just like remember that for a second. So let's say we're talking about the group that actually have access to AI. So how is that happening? How is AI burnout happening? So with the students, it's a different thing. And with me, it's a different thing. With the university administrators, it's a different thing. And we're trying to work with all these three different groups. So I do have some insights. I'm not going to say that it is a 360, understanding of what is going on, but I think there are generational gaps. So if you are a Gen Z or Alpha or even younger, I forgot the name of that generation. It's very different because you are sort of with Gen Alpha, you're growing up with LLMs, you're growing up with generative AI, all that kind of like all those kinds of models. And with Gen Z, like you're using it as adults, like been using it for a few years now. With someone like me as a millennial, like I had to learn some of that. I'm curious and all that. But then we have Gen Xers and boomers. They are thinking of this as from a very different angle. I'm not saying all boomers are against use of AI, but I don't think burnout is happening in that generation. Um, I think the burnout question is very specific to the ones whose livelihoods depend on use of AI. I have a cousin who is or used to be an executive in IBM, recently lost their job and probably will get one next week. But this is the person, right? He is one of the top leaders, executive leaders in IBM, lost their job. And one of the things that he said, he's like, my cousin, a big brother to me, is like, oh, like what's all this like, stuff with AI? Like everything, you have to have like multiple agents at what you were saying, Nick, right? So I think the people at the very top are sort of comprehending the extent to which AI can actually be deployed and help people. So they're like, AI, do this with AI. You should have 3 different agents if you're working for me. That is like the kind of pressure that I'm hearing from my friends and my family who are in the corporate sector, in the corporate world. But if you ask them, like, do your boss really understand? Does he or she or they understand what they really want from you through the use of AI? Most of the cases they're like, I don't know. So it's like there's a hype that use AI. By using AI, you'll become more productive. But how? Like that question, only a few can answer, in my point of view. And then some of us are actually researching AI and also trying to build agents that can help humans. For us, like, I don't think AI burnout is the problem. The problem is sort of really taking the research and the solutions to a level where the corporate sector and the government and the public sector actually understand how some of these confusions can be resolved. I think that is a lot happening in the research world, but it's we're keeping it limited to like peer reviewed journal articles and op-eds and those kinds of venues.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question,
Nope,
but
that's perfect. And before I kind of jump into some of the closing questions I have for both Crystal and Fatima, anyone who has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Usually they'll all appear right when I'll be like, all right, and signing off, it'll boom. So hopefully we can get them a little earlier. All right, here's one question. Crystal, I'll ask you the question first, and then Fatima, I'll ask you the question after. If you had the opportunity to give a 15-minute, and I've not asked either of you or prepped either of you for this question, so it is nowhere in our previous conversations. You're given 15 minutes to a Fortune 100 board. You are being paid to help advise them. What are you spending those 15 minutes on?
Decision making, how to make decisions with the new tools and resources available to you. And I'm giving them my Swiss cheese analogy of this is your brain, and the holes in the cheese are the different ways that your brain makes mistakes and like cognitive error and bias. And this is what you've been making decisions with. And this is your AI. And here are the holes and the things that it can't do yet, and the things that it doesn't do well, and the things that you just don't want it to do. And the job is to find a way to overlay those so that there's no holes that go all the way through. And you've got one layer of cheese at least everywhere, but we're doing a terrible job of that. And here are some things that we can do in your company to make sure that you're optimizing the humans that are left. That's my 15 minutes.
Excellent. I love it. So you will have a package solution. I'm sure if there is a board out there that wants to hire a Crystalline Group to give that 15-minute Swiss cheese, I'm sure they can find you online.
Fatima and I are ready. We will come in. We will do the workshop for you. Do not worry.
All right, Fatima, same question to you. You've got 15 minutes, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 board. What are you teaching them? What do you want them to know?
I mean, what do they want to know? Like, what is their problem? Like, my question would be like, what is your problem that you're trying to solve? And
they don't know.
They don't know their problems. I mean, that's a big problem. Well, let's find your problem. I mean, most of the time, what I'm hearing from leaders, like leaders at the university or leaders running an NGO or an organization, is that how do we maximize our productivity? So in that case, like if you really want to maximize your productivity, that means you have to understand what productivity means in your context, right? Does it mean optimizing the people that are working for you? Does it mean that you really want to like groom and grow like higher level critical thinkers, like the next level thinkers that are going to change the entire calculation for you, that are going to give you solutions and creative solutions that are going to like really change the future of your company or organization? If that's your goal, then I'm your guy. I'll tell you how to optimize and how you can do that without spending like millions of dollars, by using even like the free tools that are available to you. I'm not against the use of AI or any kind of models, like whether it's statistical model or an LLM or a machine learning model. I'm not against any of those. But the question is that how is it helping me? I don't
Yeah.
think most people are asking that question. Like, how is it helping me? Yeah, it's really cool. Like, iPhone is cool, but how is iPhone helping me? Or like calculator is cool, but how is it helping me? If I'm like failing my math class, if I'm not understanding anything about like math, like that calculator is not helping my math or reasoning ability. So that's what I'm gonna tell the
I love
audience.
this first principles all the way, and Crystal is all about finding the holes in our cheese or our
Well,
collective.
look, you want to spend a lot of money getting rid of layers of human workers and replace them with agents. That's fine. But then you are in the position of having to be in control of the agents, and you definitely need to know what those agents are doing, and the decision making responsibility really shifts for those higher up the chain if they're getting rid of those lower levels. So they
Yeah.
damn well better know what they are actually getting themselves in for if that's the way that they think they're going to improve their ROI and make their shareholders happy.
Yeah. Well, this is a perfect closing and segue because if you are interested in learning about bringing ROI to your organization or how to orchestrate agents hands-on level, we have a number of courses coming out. AI for executives, which is for technical leaders on how to build and prototype AI blueprints. We have a data and AI literacy class, and both of those classes are taught in 90-minute increments, 1 week at a time. So it's very digestible. You have take-home assignments that you can apply to your organizations. Other courses, we have the free, and I say free as in free 99 AI tools for everyone, which is taught by Dr. John Chung of Databricks, Jen Garcia, and myself. That launched season 2 today. So it teaches tools like ChatGPT, Google's Nano Banana, Google Notebook LM, and we'll be dropping Claude on top of that as a refresher in a couple of months, and a host of other AI courses taught by such luminaries as Dr. Crystal Dilworth and other instructors on Caltech campus. So, Crystal and Fatima, I cannot thank you enough for joining. Can both of you just briefly say how folks can reach out to you if they are interested in following your research? Maybe you have a blue sky or really sharp Twitter account that they want to follow. I guess we're supposed to say X these days, but that'll never go away. How do they follow you?
Fatima, go for it.
I mean, that's a tricky question, but I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm unfortunately not very active on Blue Sky. That's on my list of things to do. But you can find me on LinkedIn if you type in Fatima E.Zara, Zahra. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can also email me at fzara@utk.edu. We have a website, our lab website, airlab.online, air with an E, because it stands for Artificial Intelligence Studies and Evaluation. Airlab.online, you can also like find out about our work there.
Yeah. And for me, it's the same. LinkedIn for like personal outreach, and for, if you're really interested in a workshop or something like that, either the Air Lab outreach to Fatima or the CTME connection, like we can figure out which one works
Very,
best. So
very nice. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Crystal and Fatima. We'll see everybody else for episode 6 of season 2 of Making AI Possible. Thanks a lot.